Hey there, little buddies, and welcome to yet another edition of the Boob Tube Buddies Podcast. In this episode, we discuss Chapter 6 of the FX original series, Legion. I am Mothman, and I'm joined by the untrusty narrator to my untrusty therapist, Nathan.
I never know what to expect, what I am to you this week. Yeah. Who I am to you changes week to week, Mathis.
It does, and I never give much thought which one is which. I just come up with two things that are topical from the episode and say this to my. For all I know, the analogy is completely broken every single time. So, before we get into things, this is a very special episode. You want to know why?
Why?
This is like the first early morning, early AM Boob Tube Buddies podcast that has ever taken place.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant of Legion.
Nope.
And I was like, what makes it, because Aubrey Plaza dances in it?
I mean, that's very special too. But
okay, yeah. It's 8 a.m. and we're recording, Mathis.
It's 8:04 a.m. I'm not sure. Like, I've done some morning podcasts with Devin, but they're like 11. Like, honestly, they're more like early afternoon type stuff. Yeah. But it was just the only thing that would work. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a few disclaimers out there. Wife's in the kitchen making coffee. I'm gonna try to keep it quiet. I now am hearing lawn work happening at neighbors' houses and eventually our house. So I don't know what cacophony is going to be going on behind us. The other thing is, I kind of feel like we're supposed to throw the weather and traffic at some point.
Because it's early in the morning.
Isn't that what you do?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 8:05 a.m. at your local,
welcome to Boob Tube Buddies in the morning. If you're on your way to traffic, let's throw the Dan and eye in the sky and get to all that. But we're not going to do any of that because we're a podcast.
Yeah, of course.
But so
we talk about dumb TV shows.
Yeah, social media. We talk about it every time. Really, the point there is just to be part of the conversation, also just to see when stuff is getting released. So follow us on pretty much any of it. But also two exciting developments that have happened in the last week. We created a Patreon account, Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/boobtubebuddies, it is a way to support us. You can basically just donate or do like $1 a month, any kind of different segment of things. The idea being that we have the Audible link. We have the Blue Apron link that I'm about to go over, but we also know that we're not expecting people just to try services they have no interest in, just to help us out, right? So if you listen to any of the 4 or 5 episodes we put out weekly for 8 months for free and enjoy it, this is a way to support us periodically. At the same time, if you're not in a position to, honestly, just sharing our stuff and retweeting and letting friends know is a big part of our show growing. And it's also topical because right now a trending hashtag is TRYPOD, TRYPOD. And that's just simply, even places like 538 Elections and all these big podcasts are doing it just to get awareness up. Because right now only around 20% of Americans listen to podcasts. It's still very much an emerging art form. So I'm off my soapbox. I'm done.
I didn't know that, though. I didn't know that only 20% of Americans listen to podcasts. It makes sense. It's actually kind of high if I think about, what podcasts were a decade ago,
Yeah, it's 20%, and, half of that percent listen regularly, more than one podcast a week. The rest, I think, are just, they've tried it. So it's still pretty small gain. The other thing that's crazy to me, apparently the number one place to listen to podcasts is the home, not the car.
What?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of when I've listened to a podcast at home. Going to bed, I know I've listened to podcasts.
Yeah.
They help me fall asleep.
I've done that as well. Know what I think it might be? Maybe the question's bad. Maybe the question's do you listen to podcasts at home? Do you listen to podcasts in a car? Do you listen to podcasts fill in the blank? And so then all the mass transit people in New York City that listen to podcasts every day don't drive, and so it throws out the... You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, because they're not in the car.
Yeah, that's pure speculation. Whatever big podcast thing that just happened with all the data diving, I'm not shitting on your numbers. I don't know a thing about them. Anyway.
I'm sure your data is accurate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're definitely better at...
Did you suggest that the survey is flawed in some way or has any form of bias?
Anyway.
Well, either way, people are listening to podcasts, and that's cool. I thought Try Podcast was Try Podcasting, which also, if you got that passion or you've got that interest, you should pick up a microphone and just start recording yourself talking, man. Because podcasting is a great form of just expressing your opinion. So I think that's a cool thing for us to talk about too.
I think it is, but I think maybe the better formula is try it, listen to it, be really critical, self-conscious, don't put it out, and then any of the good ideas in there, just message them to us so we can be more successful.
Done. Easy.
Right? Okay.
Do the trial and error for us.
Yeah, turn us into podcast vampires. At this point, we have to start talking about Legion, right?
We do. And I actually have some stuff I want to quickly talk about before we talk about the episode itself.
Go.
All right, cool. So I want to talk to you guys about my guy, Brad Mann. All right, this guy. So firstly, actually, what I should say is I want to talk about Fargo really quickly because there's what I was watching this episode on the FX website, and they're currently showing spots for Fargo season 3, and one of them begins with just a woman driving down a road and it's snowing, and then there's something in the road, and I couldn't rewind it to see what that thing in the road was. It looked like a microwave or something, and she stops and she gets out and she goes, "What's this?" And she like radios it in. She's like a police officer. I did not catch that the show had gone to commercial, and so I thought this was a scene in Legion because it was the first commercial in the commercial break. And I was like freaking out because the Fargo music was playing, and I was like, "What's happening? Oh my God, we've gone to Fargo in Legion. What's going on?" And I was like freaking out until it like said Fargo season 3, and I was like, "Oh bullshit! God damn it!" I was so excited.
You thought it was really good an experience. I mean, it's already experimental, but like, I don't know how I would feel about that. Like early on in the podcast, Fox and I would somehow always talk about crossovers. Like he hates them and I love them. And I think the reason we talked about it is at the time the Brooklyn Nine-Nine crossover with New Girl came on, which he wasn't a fan of, and I hadn't watched yet. I've watched it since, and it was okay, right? But I also just have this soft spot growing up for like the Scooby-Doo Batman episode,
of course,
the Flintstones Jetson episode, and also more than anything else, just growing up a comic fan. Most of these superheroes live in the same city, so like it was always exciting just to be reading X-Men, and then like for like 2 episodes get Spider-Man. So I'm sure if anyone could pull it off, it would be Noah Hawley. Let's put it that way.
I know. Well, like I'd even be okay with just a very quick like cut to a scene in a police station, and it's Fargo, and you have to have seen Fargo to understand the crossover. And that's it. That's the whole thing.
Not even a crossover as much as like a heavy-handed reference for like,
that's it,
Easter egg, right? So as far as this episode goes, they keep the motif where they're in the mental institution for most of the episode. So we now have like 2 full mental institution episodes.
Oh, wait,
Aubrey Plaza.
I gotta finish telling you about Brad Mann.
Oh yeah, who's Brad Mann?
Brad. So if you've seen Fargo season 2, Brad Mann is one of the Kitchen brothers. He's Gail Kitchen. All right, he's one of the 2 quiet brothers, not the one who dies, not the one who. Oh shit. Okay, if you haven't seen Fargo season 2,
God.
Spoilers.
I mean, to be fair. I'm not going to say anything else. Okay, go on.
Anyways, so he's Gail Kitchen. So anyways, good actor, really good actor. And my wife once posted a picture of us on Instagram sitting, and we were on our couches with our dog and our cat, and it said, "We're all in our normal places to watch TV," and then she hashtagged it a bunch of stuff. She hashtagged it Fargo season 2. So then Brad Mann likes the post.
Oh, God.
And I know, and Tabitha was like, "Oh, what? Who is this?" And she like researches it. She's like, "Oh my God, it's one of the Kitchen brothers." And so then she starts commenting back and forth with him. And then they had this whole little conversation on her thing about Fargo season 2. And he was super excited that we liked it and stuff. So anyways, he was a really, really nice guy. I know, it's super cool. He is the guy we couldn't figure out if he's really the eye in this show last week.
Oh.
Yeah.
What are the chances, like how long ago is this comment thread?
Oh, the one of Fargo season 2?
Well, when Brad Mann is talking to Tabitha.
Yeah, that was. Oh, here we go. I mean, Instagram gives you things in weeks, right? Oh no, Justin, July 13th, 2016.
Oh God, I think you should resurrect that comment thread and see if we'll come on the Boob Tube Buddies podcast.
Well, that's what I thought. Is like he's really, really good, and he's in this, and I've loved that character. I just haven't been able to figure out whether or not that's the eye in, a different form, or if he has somehow taken the body of this guy. But he currently has credits for Legion in episodes 1, 5, and 6.
Yes.
No, yeah, 5 and 6. Because in this episode, he is in the mental hospital. He's the guy drooling.
Yes, he is the guy drooling, which I immediately saw, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? There's like a lot of questions raised in this episode. Your task for next week is to give us a heartbreaking answer that he said no, or news that he said yes, by the way.
Or exciting news that he's going to be coming onto the show. I know, I fully anticipate.
Because we got, 2 episodes left?
We do.
Okay. So anyway, we start in the mental institution. You have Aubrey Plaza as the therapist. That theme continues throughout, and you're basically seeing every character as a shadow of their former selves, but you're also, even before they confirm it, definitely not sold that this is really reality.
Of course not. No, and we talked last week about okay, well, is there a chance that this is actually just that it's all been a dream? And I don't know, it's fun to discuss, but the second this episode started, I was like, no, it's not. This is all in David's head. I don't know why. It just immediately began to scream to me that this is, the green-eyed monster trapping them inside David's head.
Yes, the one eye, one horn, flying purple people eater.
That guy,
or the demon with yellow eyes. You know what? Why don't we do our summon up and a tweak, and then we can kind of branch off from there. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Perfect. I like to make sense.
I would buy that.
Here's our first segment, Summon It Up in a Tweet.
Oh yeah, we're summon it up, so summon it up. Summon it up, oh yeah, we're summon it up. Oh yeah, we're summon it up, so summon it up. Summon it up and up.
Tweet. Okay, so, and we'll talk about this because it's kind of a weird crux of the episode. I found myself almost describing it to Michael, and I was like, it's kind of hard to describe. It's something you understand because you've seen it, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. My tweet is, back to life, back to reality, except reality is just the climax from last episode, which was also in someone's mind, but hey, that Aubrey Plaza. That's my tweet.
So it's like, quote from song, except not really, also different thing.
Yeah, that's my formula. I'm kind of upset you cracked it on air.
Oh, damn it.
We're supposed to be, harvesting the secrets of other failed podcasts, not giving them out.
All right. Okay, cool. I like that. That sums it up nice and sweetly. Looking down at my phone, something has happened to my note where I wrote my tweet. It just disappeared. No way. How did that happen?
That's why
there it is.
I was about to say, I always screenshot mine the moment I complete it because I don't actually send the tweet, so I'm worried it'll delete itself. Maybe you were in a different plane of existence for a moment there.
Maybe, because I'm like, that doesn't just happen, but I think my pinky may have accidentally hit the trash can. Either way. All right, so my tweet describes the state of what's going on in this episode. You ready?
I'm so ready.
You ready? Okay. Stuck inside a fake psych ward. Psych or psychic? And what's this door? David's brain is getting real. And tell me, how does that make you feel?
Man, that was interesting.
It's a play. It's a play on words because at the end, well, it's not a play on words, but it says, "How does that make you feel?" And that's what psychiatrists say to their patients. But I'm also asking the audience if they like the episode.
Oh, okay. So the way you said it, I almost felt like I was watching the dramatizations on America's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
Right? And then you had the play on words as well.
Yep.
But it also kind of felt like you were reading to me Goodnight Moon.
Why would I read Goodnight Moon in that voice? Good night.
I think it was just the cadence.
Okay.
It felt very bedtime story.
It sounds very storybook.
And there's wordplay. Overall,
it's very cops. Is what you're saying? So it's very David finds himself in a psych ward, but they're after him.
Yes, that's very much so. Either way, I'm a fan.
Yeah, thanks.
But all good things must come to an end, and that was Summon It Up in a Tweet. All right, so the kind of main thing I wanted to talk about, there's a few things there, right? You're going to see quite a few things culminate. The whole thing seems to clearly be in David's mind, but is it just a segment of David's mind, like, because like I was mentioning in the tweet, they have this weird moment that I was actually struggling to describe to Mike. I mean, who's seen the episodes, I don't know why, but Mike's going to be our interview in a minute or two here. But I was like, it's almost like they're rescued from the reality of the mental institution and brought back to that climax from last scene where the bullet's midair. But even that within itself had to be within David's mind. They didn't like physically go to his childhood home, right?
No. Wait, the moment with the bullets?
Yeah, that's taking place in David's childhood home, but it doesn't really take place in his childhood home, right? It was all in their mind?
It's still again, where they're still trapped in a version of his mind. Yeah, because this is now the moment that you're talking about, the end where she's walking through, right?
Well, I'm talking about the end of last episode when like they get shot and then they end up in the mental institution. And in this episode,
when she's walking up, she mentions that careful, this could all be fake, right? And then they go into his home, and then the guns happen. But yes, that very well could have just been in his mind from the start, and they never were actually there.
Was your impression last episode that they actually went to his physical?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It was because they drove there at some point. Like they started they made the decision to go to his home because that's where they figured out he would be.
Oh, okay. Then that makes a little more sense. Because in my mind, I was thinking I forgot that they actually got in the car and drove there, and it wasn't just like this mental excursion. So then it was, so that I was just like, wait, so they're being woken up from this like not reality and then brought to another not quite reality, but maybe it's more real. But
she said it could have been David's brain, but I think it was probably real because that gives more severity to the moment where Sid grabs him and says, "David, white room," and then they everything pauses. And right now, even up to everything basically that happens in this episode, reality is currently paused at bullets midair. Like that's where the real world is, and the whole context of this episode takes place in that moment of real life. But it's obviously it's a 50-minute episode in David's mind. So because at the end of this episode there is a moment where we go back there, but not really. And like she touches Melanie touches the bullet, right? Like and it shocks her. Like there's very much that real world momentum going on there, and I don't know what triggers it. Like, is it just simply David? Like, is that just his response to realizing he's about to die, that he kind of freezes reality, or not really freezes reality, but like takes everyone to this other dream and I don't know, tries to bide time and figure things out? That's the thing, is the question now becomes, Melanie looks at it and says, okay, I can't, she's there, she's in that moment, which is now essentially a memory of David's because he knows everything up to that point, and so she's experiencing that memory of David's and thinking, how can I stop this? But she can't because they're not really there yet. So yes, this sort of gives them that moment and time to figure out how to get away from the danger that is outside in the real world, but it doesn't stop the fact that there is certainly a very present danger inside his mind. And so no one is safe. No one is safe this episode, Mattis.
That is very, very true. So
it should have been my tweet. No one is safe.
And for those of you, I'm just going to go ahead and reveal it. Because they've showed teaser for next trailer. We officially know who the demon with yellow eyes is.
I didn't see the teaser for next trailer.
Okay. Well,
are we talking about the fact that in this episode, Aubrey Plaza briefly turns into the demon with the yellow eyes and then back into Aubrey Plaza?
No, we're not talking about that. Crap. There is still is she fully just like the demon with the yellow eyes? Like, that's what I was thinking it was. But no, they call him Amal Farouk in the next episode teaser.
Got it. So he has a name.
And that is the Shadow King from the X-Men comics.
The Shadow King.
So Shadow King, I think I told this to a friend of mine, Dan, when we were talking about it, because a lot of people were throwing around Mojo, and I was like, well, the nature of the power is like Shadow King is the only character I can think of, but Shadow King's also never been like this big heavy hitter villain, mainly because he basically looks like Kingpin with a pencil mustache and a fez hat. Like, he's a big fat dude in a white suit with a fez hat and like a pencil mustache. He's not the most interesting character, but because he takes over minds, like when he's in there, he looks very demonic and he has different versions. But what's most interesting to him is I never really knew his origin. Apparently, he came later in the comics, right? Like the early 60s X-Men books. They're already fighting Magneto, all this good stuff. But eventually when they introduce him, his origin is that, not his origin, but his introduction to Professor Xavier, which again, in the comics, is the father of, Legion, right? David Haller. He is the first mutant that Charles ever meets that's evil. The first mutant he ever meets that wants to use his powers for bad instead of good, which essentially puts him on the path of wanting to create the X-Men and cultivate like good morals for these youngsters.
Oh, that's cool. That's interesting.
Right? So I had no idea about that. I just knew of this kind of character. If they actually use that origin and really flesh him out, that's actually kind of a cool stepping stone and setting point to bring Professor X into the series and also tie it into the rest of the universe without having to play fan service to it.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up to you, and Mike, you know what? Let's throw to Mike's interview, if you don't mind. Because there's some good stuff in there I actually want to talk to you about that we've kind of beaten around the bush and hinted at.
Perfect.
And we'll come back and discuss a little more. So we will be right back.
Player 3 has entered the game.
All right. So for this week, we actually are joined by Mike, who has been on numerous other Boob Tube Buddies podcasts. Most recently, we just did King Kong, that should be out by the time you see this. You've done La La Land with Foxman. We just did... What movie did we just do?
Oh, we did Logan.
Oh, duh. Yeah, we just did Logan.
Yeah.
And he's on every single episode of the Black Mirror podcast. So welcome, Mike.
Oh, it's always good to be here. I'm excited to talk some Legion.
Absolutely. So I guess just to let this kind of go in an organic direction, just talk to me about your thoughts on Legion thus far. Like, we're almost at the end of it at this point, and we still don't really know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, it's so great because it's got the most untrustworthy narrator like ever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no telling what's going on, like what's real, what's not real. I think kind of now with the last 2 episodes, kind of getting a beat on it. But I mean, they could have him wake up tomorrow and said, "Oh, this is all going on in my head," and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it's very unconventional television. There is always this kind of that trope of, the narrator of the whole story is lying, and so it's a way to do a twist. But I mean, the show is very unconventional, and you don't know what's true or what's not. I mean, did you watch Westworld?
I did. I'm a big fan of Westworld.
Yeah, Westworld was fantastic, but regardless how you felt of it overall, like one of the things that continued to keep you guessing was also just the nature of it, right? The AI element, the scope of the technology, like you didn't know what was really happening, what wasn't for a while. And I feel like we're getting to a place with the show where you're going to have a little more linear stuff going on once this initial mind battle is complete. But right now, this season is the season about him finding himself and the audience kind of going through that chaos in his mind.
Well, yeah, I think Westworld's a great analogy for this show because one of the big things in Westworld was the various time frames we were seeing. Like, there was the young man in black, old man in black, and I think there was somebody on Reddit that had like 5 different time frames that they made a pretty solid argument for. But in this show, it's more like a show that's on FX. I don't know if you watch it, called Archer, the comic.
I am very behind. I've definitely seen it. I love Frisky Dingo, which was a show on Adult Swim predating it with the same kind of like actors and stuff. But I'm like so out of touch with it. It's probably been 5 years since I watched a season.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the big thing with Archer is like you never know what time it's taking place, like, and that's how it is with Legion. Okay. Is that like at times it's clearly like they're wearing clothing that's in the style of the '60s, or then it's more towards the '70s. That whole time frame. But when he's at the D3 facility, like in episode 1, they're wearing body armor and carrying weapons that are modern day. And like even in this last episode, like I keep looking for it. So like whenever they make a reference, I like look it up on my phone real fast. But the medicine they were giving was like Abilify, which is, I looked it up, a medicine that wasn't even created until like 1988. So the time frame, so the time frame on the show is really, really fascinating to me. I just would love to know exactly what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, because okay, so that drug is kind of the solid piece. Is there anything else you've seen that's definitely like an anachronism, or do you think that was just a mistake?
No, there's more going on. Like, I think when they're sitting in the, like, it's little stuff though. I think when they're having the meeting before he runs off to the D3 facility, and it was last episode. I think the G.I. Joe toys on the thing are like 1980 G.I. Joe toys. Because in the 60s and 70s, they were big.
12 inches. They were giant.
Right. But no, I mean, other than the weapons in episode 1, and I think the car that they're driving has like a CD player in it. So
all right.
So there's some other stuff going on there. So I'd love to know exactly what that is. If it's just like a show choice, like it is an Archer, where it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a stylistic thing, because I mean, it makes sense, right? Like it's a show about the inner workings and mechanisms of the mind, and so to make it kind of psychedelic and 60s is kind of the general aesthetic. From an artistic standpoint, makes sense. I was actually mentioning, I can't remember which episode, but it's Nathan, that I guess Patrick Stewart came out and said even though he's kind of retired the role of Professor X, he would play it for Legion. And the first thing Nathan mentioned was like, well, how would they make that work with the time frames? But I didn't even catch on the fact that there's kind of these anachronisms that are saying, well, we don't really care about the time frames either. And if you're not really sure what's reality and what's not, then like bring it on and have them drop some F-bombs, right?
God, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about like, because I was reading an article today that said they don't, like he doesn't really care about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like even though like a lot of the same people are involved, the show director, what's his name, Hawley?
No, Hawley, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he just doesn't, like, he's like, I'm just going to make my show, and if they want to tie it in, that's their business. He's like, but I'm not making my show to necessarily tie into that. So if they did tie it in, that'd be cool.
Well, yeah, because ultimately, like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't cross into this. This is really only constrained by, like, the Fox X-Men universe, which ultimately...
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah. So, like, the nice thing about that is he's, like... But that speaks to multiple points, because one, I think he very much is interested in just making his own show that's based on a property that gives you pretty far reach as to what you want to do, and not instead trying to emulate kind of like the family film, all ages nature of Marvel. Like, let that be its own thing that works well and people love. Let this be darker, and then like with Logan, which we just reviewed, a much darker take as well. And to me, like, if Fox is going to continue to make superhero movies and not just strike a deal like they did with Spider-Man and give them over to Marvel, then I think the route to go, like Deadpool as well, is these more mature content films, because ultimately people that were reading these characters when they were popular and where most of these stories are based on, they're now all adults that are going to see R-rated movies anyway.
Right, exactly. I think, yeah, we talked about that with Logan, that the more graphic is much more pleasing to the, I think, the larger comic book audience. I mean, maybe the kids have been raised on the movies, but for those of you that are like that grew up on the comic books, yeah, it definitely needs to be modernized to fit your new your new priorities and sensibilities.
Yeah, and it's not to say I can't get enjoyment out of like the Marvel all ages movies. I love most of them dearly, but there's also just something special about being able to see Deadpool and it like have those types of jokes. I mean, just watching a show like this, and there's all kinds of sex weirdness and like jerk off jokes and like stuff you aren't expecting from something based on a comic book that's on network television, and is in stark contrast to, say, the other Marvel TV shows and the other like DC TV shows. Like, this is nothing like the CW stuff, and it's very much nothing like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or any of that stuff either.
Right, and I mean, as much as I love a good CW show, I mean, this stuff this stuff that FX is putting out is like so far above and beyond what they have. It's not even worth comparing.
Yeah. So before we wrap it up, I guess the one other thing I'd love to hear from you as someone that's kind of caught up on the show and there's not much time left. Where do you think it will resolve? Is there any kind of thing that it could pull that you think would be a cop out and would disappoint you?
I think I would be upset if they came out and said that, the whole first season has been
In the mental institution?
has been in his head. I mean, yeah, I don't mind parts of it being in his head, but I think there's definitely been aspects that are in reality. I think everything that deals with D3 has been set in a more modern, real time than the stuff you see in the mental hospital.
Yeah. I mean, this newest episode does make me think the linear time frame we're grounded in is kind of, I don't know, it's hard to say, right? Because they're getting brought back to this house where the bullets are going off and just like floating in thin air, and you're like, okay, that's reality. So this mental institution that they're in, they're getting pulled out into there, like that's fake. But at the same time, they were going to David's childhood home and they weren't really going there, so that's also fake. So are they all still just, I don't know, sitting around playing like some other game? And then
right, if they go to a cutscene at the final episode where they're all still sitting at that circular table in the glass room holding the handles, I'm gonna be a little pissed.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Short of that, I'll be all right with. Yeah,
fair enough. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Mike. We appreciate it. And check out, yeah, absolutely. And check out our Kong review we just did. We just did one on Logan, and we will continue to review stuff together as time and content permits.
Player 3 has left the game.
And we are back. Thank you so much, Michael, for being on the show. Always a thought-provoking discussion. I'm glad to hear he is enjoying the show as much as we are. But he really did like unravel some things for me, and now we're going to kind of discuss it, which is just like the anachronism, the fact that there's drugs that are clearly like not super modern, but like late 80s, yet there is dress and stuff that's obviously 60s and 70s. And I think you and I both got the 60s, 70s feel through most of the show, correct?
Through the very beginning. Even like just the color of orange, the tracksuits, the design of the mental institution. I figured, and maybe a little bit of it was like a misconception on my part that he is certainly the son of Professor X, which is not a definite yet, right? But if I thought about that, I'm like, okay, well, Professor X, blah, 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 when this happened, it would have to be around, that time frame. And so, but maybe even that math is wrong. I don't know. I just had a perception that, this takes place, back in the 70s. And his points there kind of blow my mind a little bit. I didn't even notice or think about those things.
Well, yeah, and like the D3 like military outfits, that I could also just see being a wardrobe thing, right? Like the script says tactical, the prop department does it, and they're not necessarily trying to find military garb from the 70s. Right. So I could just see that being more of like a wardrobe change. But after the interview, I kind of looked into it. There's an article on Bustle. Says, when is Legion set? The time period ambiguity is by design. And there's a really great quote from Noah Hawley, which is, when I wrote the script, I assumed it was set in present day and in our world. And I think the network assumed that too. Then when it came time to make it, I thought of it more as a fable on some level, and I realized I wanted to make something subjective, which is to say the whole show is not the world, it's David's experience of the world. He's piecing his world together from nostalgia and memory, and the world becomes that. I found myself watching A Clockwork Orange and Quadrophenia and a lot of 60s British films. Costume-wise, Clockwork had a specific look to it that I wanted to play with. I wanted to create a world that had its own rules, and that was about putting you into David's head and seeing things that aren't here and aren't there. You wonder, who is this guy if everything he's thought about himself is wrong? So, pretty interesting, right? Good.
Yeah, because not necessarily from a narrative perspective, but definitely from a design and stylistic perspective, everything we're seeing is what David perceives it to be. The way that things are is slightly off or strange, not in a way that needs explaining, just from a stylistic decision standpoint to say this show is about a guy who doesn't really have a full grasp on reality. So the way that you perceive the show is going to be the way that he perceives what has happened. And that's super cool. And it gives a lot of credence to some of the questions that you and I have raised in these past few episodes. Also, it makes me wonder if he really owns any of those shirts, or if he just made those shirts up, and if they were just, shirts that he wanted to wear, because I really want that shirt with that orange arrow. I'm just saying.
I know, yeah. There's a lot of cool design stuff and clothes and things. And I could see almost like, whatever this battle with the Shadow King or like this, kind of plays out. I can almost see this season ending with his, like, you seeing normal reality. Like, for the first time, there being clarity. Everyone's just dressed like it's in the
just like
2000s.
Like a Prius drives by them, and
yeah.
There's like a dude vaping, and we're back into like the 2000s. Yeah.
At this point, though, I mean, are there any other key pieces you wanted to tackle? I mean, it's obviously very clear they're in his mind. This whole episode is just a battle to get back to reality.
I wanted to shout out to the Aubrey Plaza development in this episode, because there's a lot of, every character gets a little bit of development, and there's some absolutely great moments. The stuff between Carrie and Carrie is great. The stuff with Sid and her perception that this is not, Sid always seems to have this sort of extrasensory perception that when things are real and when they're not. She's always the one seeing things that others can't, and I like that, and you get more of that in this episode. But the biggest thing is the way that what we now know to be Dream Kinger. King Dreamer.
What?
King Crusher. What's the name of the bad guy?
Shadow King?
The Shadow King. The way
Candy Crush. It's Candy Crush.
King Candy Crush. Anyways, the way that the Shadow King embodies this, form of Lenny, Aubrey Plaza just is fucking knocking everything out of the park in this show, man. She's so good. And there's this just awesome montage,
the dance number,
LSD dance sequence.
Yeah, it's got like this like weird psychedelic burlesque scene.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way of, psychedelic.
Right, because like her pants disappear. And,
yes, they do. She's got fishnets.
She's in fishnets, and it's just this weird dance scene. And like it's cool because it's going through different scenes from the show. So like eventually she's dancing in the kitchen, which is that terrible memory that of him handling the breakup with his girlfriend. So you kind of see him just twisting through his mind and these different different pain points he's experienced, I guess.
Yep. And dancing in a very cheery way, as if to say that, he's winning, and, this is what gives him absolute pleasure. And then later is a conversation about essentially his motivation, and really the crux, the big factor that's driving everybody in the show, which is this, the sort of motif of power. And she has a whole conversation with David about power and the pursuit of power, and that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
And so that is what King Candy Crush is after, and that is, she says at one point, Walter gets it, which Walter is stuck in here with them, right? The eye is right. Oh wait, Walter's the eye, right? Yeah.
Walter is the eye, and everyone's stuck. Everyone in that room is basically frozen in time and taken into this memory. In which case,
Walter seems to have sided now with the bad guy, right?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Is that what you got out of it?
Yeah, because he came in there to shoot him, right? He's the one with the gun, isn't he?
Well, I mean specifically within David's head, because I don't think that D3 is in any way in cahoots with the Shadow King, right?
Yeah, no.
Right. So, but in this, it seems that in their quote-unquote session that the Shadow King had with Walter, because she's having sessions with everybody where they're going through therapy, right?
Yeah.
It seems like, though, that he sort of got in line with this thing that's inside of David and is now acting in its interest, at least for right now.
Okay.
It may be for his own self-interest. I'm sure that it is,
sure.
But when she says Walter gets it, and then you cut to Walter and he's like chasing and capturing everybody in David's head, that I get this feeling that it's like, oh God, he even turned into the bad guy when he was inside of David's head.
I'm sure Shadow King's in there and it's like, well, that guy's the villain already. I'm sure he'll help in this memory.
Exactly. And that's kind of what it felt like. And I was like, damn, we all had a moment to connect because we were all stuck in David's head. But no, not at all. But yeah, so that's the crux of this episode, was the idea, the motif of power, and the way that what we now know to be the Shadow King and the killer Aubrey Plaza is playing that. So those are all my thoughts, man.
Cool. Yeah, no, another great episode. I mean, the other thing we talked about in the interview is just the analogies to Westworld, because Westworld also has multiple timelines, and you're also not sure what is reality just because of the premise of the show. And the thing for me is, like, I'm sure it'll end in some kind of satisfying conclusion, but I do wonder...
David was Sid the whole time.
Right, yeah. They swap bodies and never swap back. Duh. I am kind of wondering, like, when it comes to a second season, where do they go from here? Do they, with the defeating the villain, if that even happens, maybe it's a cliffhanger, do they have David go back to normal? Or, like, I don't necessarily want him to be fixed season 2, but I also don't necessarily want him to be as untrusty of a kind of like narrator either. So hopefully there's like a line to balance where he's more than anything just battle damaged and like PTSD because of the 30 years being possessed. So I'm sure there's plenty to play with, but at the same time, like, I can see season 2 being more about like coping with less about mental illness and more about coping with the trauma and like that side of mental illness.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah,
sense.
But either way, we hope it's not about something literally inside of him tearing him apart, like an external force that's gotten into his brain. Like that's the this season problem, and we hope that we get to explore, because we're never fully able to explore David with this thing inside of him. I think that's it's not unsatisfying, but it's what you hope comes to a resolution for season 2, because as long as this thing is inside of his brain, I never know if what I'm seeing is David. And I want to know David. I want to know this character. I want to know what he struggles with. But right now, any struggle he has is just the result of this, leech. So I agree with you, and I think there's a lot they can play with for season 2. By the way, when I mentioned Fargo season 3 earlier, it's coming up soon. It's coming up in April. Mm-hmm. And if you have seen Fargo, if you haven't seen Fargo, fucking go watch Fargo. Oh my God. And there are TV spots now, like I mentioned, but there are multiple of them like they do every season that are right now on the FX YouTube channel. And I've gone and I've watched all of them, and they're amazing. And there's one with you and McGregor.
I would, if I were you, there's basically a knife fight going on at Boob Tube Buddies about who wants to cover it. I think Foxman's the only one that's like, I definitely have to cover it, but I'd get on that Slack chat, put your name in the ring. I told him you're interested, but you'd definitely be a good fit. You're a little bit obsessive.
I am. I do love Fargo, but if it winds up being that you guys are covering, no big deal. But I'll get in the Slack. We'll talk about it. Yeah. Someone's going to be talking about Fargo.
That's for damn sure. So
how about this? If it's not me, invite me. I'll do interviews.
I figure like that's the thing. Like Twin Peaks is another one where I'm pretty adamant about doing it because I love the show, but there's also numerous others. But bare minimum, we should have some good cross pollination going on because there's a lot of shows coming out that we're very excited about. So anyway, at that point, hit us up on the social medias, a Patreon, try out blueapron.com/BTB, which is our newest advertiser. So if you want home cooked meals with fresh ingredients that are easy to follow, you get $30 off by trying our coupon code. Other than that, I don't have anything else if you don't. So you want to put a bow on this bitch?
Let's put a bow on this bitch. See you next time, little buddies.